Hello and welcome back to Paddock and Track, the show where we bring you news on and off the track. I'm Max, and of course, as always, I'm joined by Amaan.
What's up, guys?
And today we have got a very action-packed episode, so stick with us throughout the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
We'll hop straight in. I think we're going to go right into China with the sprint race.
Very first sprint race of the year.
Yeah, and not the most exciting sprint race, though the qualifying was very interesting, with Lando Norris starting on pole, with Hamilton and Alonso behind, and Verstappen starting in P4, his lowest start of the season.
Yeah, very interesting indeed.
That's especially interesting for me, I think, to see that Alonso's doing a lot better, sort of more reminiscent of last year and his ability to get some podiums last year.
Also don't count out Hamilton P2 as well.
Definitely. For a team where Russell is starting 11th, it's definitely an interesting thing to see Hamilton, like you said, up there in second place. It was a wet qualifying for that last session, so that did impact it.
So I think experience prevails in the end.
I suppose, but then why is Lando Norris on pole?
Maybe he's just, got lucky, or he's just that good.
Well, another interesting thing is Verstappen down in P4, because Verstappen is usually pretty good in the wet, so it's interesting to see him that low. But of course they haven't raced in China since 2019, and they've only had one practice session since this was a sprint weekend. So I think that's definitely impacting them, and you can see that in this qualifying. So then the biggest thing that happened on race start, Lando went way wide in that first corner. It really messed up his race a lot, starting from a great position too.
It did.
And really, he could have been able to capitalize on that. Again, it's only a 19-lap race for the sprint, so very short. And he could not capitalize on it.
So yeah, I mean, little mistakes happened there. Like, it's really hard to recover since as you said, there are only 19 laps in the sprint.
And there's none of these drivers really made pit stops that needed to.
I don't think who did.
There was one Alonso pit stop, but then he retired the lap after. So no pit stops really for these drivers. So it's very tight, very hard to make up for your mistakes that you make, especially early in the race. It can really affect your whole race.
So during lap 3, I think it was lap 3, Verstappen voiced that he was struggling during the first couple of laps.
It seemed like he was having problems with his energy system. So those drivers have battery packs along with them that help give them a little more speed down some of the straights when they choose to use it. So his battery was not really charging properly. He was having some problems with it, which definitely really hurts their speed.
Definitely.
And then another big thing by lap 7 that seemed to be fixed, but that's still a very interesting thing from Red Bull, a team that's usually pretty successful, having issues early on.
Yeah, definitely. Like, we saw the brake issue in Australia.
Yeah.
And yeah, definitely something to look out for about Red Bull.
Yeah, it seems like their reliability is not quite as good this year as it was last year.
Yeah.
Still very good, but maybe not quite as good.
Yeah, I mean, they seem to be they ran away with it last year.
Yeah.
With only giving up one win, obviously, to Carlos Sainz. But this year, it seems to be a little different.
I mean, they were able to sort this out, so unlike Australia, they were able to keep going and able to recover as Verstappen went on to win.
Yes.
However, it's still very interesting to see that they're having these problems.
Definitely.
And then Hamilton, once again complaining about his Mercedes car. He really does not like that thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing new. We know that the Mercedes is slow, but like we said, it was a surprise to see Hamilton up there in P2 as, we saw Russell in P11.
Yeah.
And with that car, I mean, I don't blame him at this point. That car is not good at all.
Yeah, he had very little rotation throughout those corners, which is very important. For them, it's like the back end has too much grip, and for them, they don't want that because it really makes it hard to go through those slow corners. So he needed more rotation. He really was not getting it. So he needed to do a couple things with the balance of the car, shifting his brake bias backwards, as well as opening up his differential. Those things will help him out through those corners, but seems like he's having a lot of problems with that car, as he's voiced in the past. So, again, but it's weird because he was leading the race.
He was.
I mean, and he was losing ground
I
to
think
Verstappen.
he was losing ground to Verstappen, but his tires locked up, and so then he just lost a lot of ground to Verstappen, so it happened earlier than expected. But it was going to happen anyway because of that slow Mercedes car.
And then right towards the end on about lap 18, there's a very exciting fight between Alonso, Perez, Sainz, and Leclerc. Those four drivers battling it out. It was very interesting.
Yeah.
Very terrible for Alonso.
So, about that, it was basically the Ferraris and Alonso fighting it out.
As well as Perez, too.
Yes, but The thing is about Perez was he was hanging back,
Yeah.
and then took the opportunity when they were struggling and came through, as in that position, past all of them.
Got up to P3, pretty good position for him.
Yes, and then who fell? I think it was Alonso who fell to last of those people, like P6.
Yeah,
and then the Ferraris filled out.
Yeah, so Alonso and Sainz touched, and Alonso picked up a puncture.
He did, and that was the only pit stop of the race to try and fix that puncture.
Yeah, but he had some other damage, I think.
He did, so...
It was not a good sprint for Alonso, especially right at the end at lap 18.
Yeah, and it was too much to recover the car.
Yeah.
It was just done at that point, yeah.
So overall, I would say it was a decent sprint race to start for the first sprint race.
Mm-hmm.
There's been more exciting races, but
definitely.
Still, it was a nice race to watch.
Yeah.
Now, let's get into the main event here, the Grand Prix, right?
Yes.
So, again, a very good qualifying for Alonso, qualifying P3 for the race.
Yes.
Norris a little further back this time in P4.
Yep.
Otherwise, not much that was really surprising, except for Hamilton.
Yeah, he's P18.
So again, like we said, a very, very big shift from the sprint, coming from P2 in the sprint qualifying all the way down to 18th.
I see here that
really terrible for him.
What happened to Sargent in P20? Why is he starting from the pit lane?
They had changed some things in Park Fermé, I believe, and that caused him to have to start in the pit lane. Yeah, so they made a couple changes in there, which just something to figure out what they were gonna do with the car.
Yeah.
Clearly it didn't work out very well for them because not a good result for Sargent. We'll get into that a little more later, but not a good result for him. So then the start of the race was very interesting actually because the strategy wise it was very interesting. So Stroll, Tsunoda, Hamilton, and Sargent were all starting on softs.
Well, I mean, I definitely like half these drivers are starting from the back of the pack, so I think they're trying to gain ground out of it.
Get those early position gains and then change onto a harder tire and go for a while.
Yeah, definitely.
Magnussen was the only driver to start on hards, and then everybody else was on mediums.
I mean, the thing about Magnussen is it's like an interesting strategy there to start on hards. I think they're like trying to get him to help Hülkenberg get into the points.
We have seen that from them.
Yeah.
And I think that is probably what their goal is now. I bet Magnussen's not going to be with the team next year.
He definitely is. I think he's just trying to cause as much damage as possible to try and get Haas into that points position.
He doesn't care as much about like racing cleanly and stuff, and I think he's willing to go out there and get penalties and stuff.
Yeah.
And just do as much as he can to help the team.
I mean, that definitely says a lot about Haas, but more on that later about Haas. But we'll talk about that after.
So this is a very high degradation track. As we've talked about before, degradation is very important when you're calculating your tire strategy because those softer tires are going to wear fast. You're not going to get as much grip towards the end of those stints. So it's really important to think about the fact that this track is high deg.
Yes.
And then adjusting to that. So Alonso gets a really, really great start. He gets past Perez, which was very important for him going to that first corner.
Yes.
Which the first like 2 corners on this track are so weird. The first 3 corners actually, really, because it's like a small corkscrew and it's such a weird.
The corkscrew
track.
is weird.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know why they decided that was the track layout they could do, but I honestly I love it. It's so much fun.
I mean, it's so unique to the other tracks too.
Definitely.
Like we haven't seen that.
And there's so many different lines that you could take through there. That's really actually interesting to see what they do. So Alonso gets a great start there, gets past Perez, but the 2 Ferraris, terrible starts for them. They lose about 2 positions, and they almost hit each other.
Yeah, so that's the thing. Like, Sainz was, like, basically... Yeah, he was, like, fighting Leclerc off the track.
Very aggressive.
He definitely was. Does it have to do anything about his own, like, saving himself?
Maybe. I could see that. I think he's definitely getting his elbows out this season.
He's definitely...
But he was really aggressive.
He did. They would have both gone off the track, but he like used Leclerc to get back onto the track. He used his own teammate to get on the track.
Yeah, he pushed Leclerc off the track a bit, and then it was nuts. Honestly, I don't know exactly what Sainz's strategy is here. Yeah, but I think you're probably right. It's more of like I don't care about the team as much.
I'm trying to like win. I'm trying to prove you wrong and then sign with another team.
A big thing that I noticed was that by lap 3, Verstappen was already 3 seconds ahead of Alonso in
Interesting
second
to
place.
see that. I mean, they definitely fixed the whatever was wrong with the battery and definitely all the problems. So I think it was back to normal for Red Bull.
Yeah, which is good for the race.
Yeah.
In a sprint, of course, you have a little more room for error. Plus, you're not racing for as many points. But for the race, he definitely doesn't want to have issues with that. So it was made sense, honestly, for me. Like, they get that fixed, they're ready to go for the race.
Yeah.
But yeah, just really interesting to see. Already he's 3 seconds ahead by lap 3.
Yeah.
So
and then next we saw a 19-second pit stop for Gasly in a very interesting fashion, if I do say so.
Yeah, well, Gasly was a bit eager to get out of that pit box.
Yeah, seriously. So we saw the back right tire fly off the car and hit one of the pit crew, and he was a very eager, as you said, very eager to get out of the pit.
Yeah, well, not great for Alpine. It's sort of reminiscent of Sauber at this point. So hopefully Alpine can trend away from that because they need as much help as they can.
And hopefully that mechanic is okay.
Yeah, I believe he was alright because those tires are pretty heavy.
Yeah, they are.
It's never great when one falls in you, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So the Red Bull actually did a very, very nice double stack.
Yes.
So it reminded me of there's a clip of a Mercedes double stack.
Wasn't it Hamilton and Bottas?
Yeah, it was really nice, but the pit stops weren't fast. It was more like the timing was really nice between each of them coming into the pit.
I think I saw that clip too.
Yeah, this was interesting though because it was less that they were timed perfectly, one came out of the pits and the other came right in. Mm-hmm. But this was they came in pretty quick after each other, but their pit stops were fast.
Yeah, the speed of the pit stops.
So a 2.1 second pit stop for Verstappen and then a 2 second right after for Perez.
I think Alpine and Sauber should be taking notes from them. Yeah,
it really shows that Red Bull's pit crew has got this down.
Yes,
we saw a very fast pit stop last season from McLaren,
mm-hmm.
And we've seen good pit stops from all these teams, but that pit stop was for me that was really impressive.
We could possibly see a pit stop record broken, maybe by Red Bull.
Maybe we'll see because right now the record is 1.8, I believe, by McLaren last year. So we'll see if they can figure it out. I heard they did a really fast one in a practice one time.
Okay.
And it was definitely it definitely beat that record. So that's very interesting. Mm-hmm. So Hamilton went on radio once again complaining about his car, as we saw in the sprint race, saying, "I can't even catch him. This car is so slow." I mean, he's talking about Ocon. So when you can't catch the Alpine, you can't catch anyone.
You definitely got a lot more problems on your hands. But and we saw again, it's just Lewis making it painfully obvious that he does not want to be in that car.
Yeah, and it's very clear that he is done with Mercedes.
Yeah,
it shows now that it was good for him to get out of Mercedes and get into that Ferrari. But again, I still think Ferrari is concerned because you can chalk some of it up to the car, but I think at a certain point it becomes the driver's fault.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, when you qualify in P18 for the race, and then you finish the race in only P9 behind your teammate who finished P6, it's not great. It's not a good look.
It's also a contradictory statement, too, because you also qualify P2 for the sprint. So you can't just be blaming the car when you feel like it. And because it's inexcusable when qualifying for P18 right after you qualify for P2 on the same track.
Well, to be fair, there was different conditions.
Yes,
but still, you're right. Yeah, no, it's weird that he's complaining because you're right. If he can qualify P2, he should be able to.
P2. Okay, yes, there was different conditions, but at least he should qualify P5 or P6. P18 is unacceptable in my opinion, no matter what condition.
I think it doesn't really make sense to me that he is this low and he just keeps complaining about the car. At some point, you need to stop complaining about the car and start actually doing something to fix it can't be all the car.
Yeah, and then that's also a character thing too. Ferrari does not want to see that he gives up too easily.
That's fair. And I assume, I don't know exactly the details, of course, of his contract. I don't know if there's anything the Ferrari can do to back out at this point. At this point, I doubt they will because, well, they've already announced it. It's a huge thing because it's Lewis Hamilton and it's Ferrari. So
yeah, it's just entirely a bad look.
I think though we're gonna see a similar career to Sebastian Vettel on Ferrari. I feel like Ferrari is a lot of the time where careers go to die. Especially in the case of people like Sebastian Vettel, right? you think you can do really well on Ferrari, and then you don't do well on Ferrari, and then you end up retiring.
And then the spotlight's on you too. So if you crash, you crash and burn.
Yeah, definitely. So then we get a virtual safety car from an issue with Valtteri Bottas on lap 21.
Yeah,
his engine just was gone. Like it wasn't. It was entirely not his fault. The engine
mechanical failure. Yeah. And we saw a virtual safety car come out for that, but then also it turned into a normal safety car.
Yeah, so this was great for all the drivers that had not pitted yet, such as Leclerc and Lando Norris, who needed to pit and get some new tires on.
Yeah.
Sauber has another slow pit stop, not as bad as they were before.
Yes,
but a 5.3
for normal standards. That is pretty bad.
for the standards of pretty much everybody else, that's not a great
As we
stop.
saw for the Red Bull, who did perform that double stack, it's not a great for the Sauber.
Verstappen and Perez both pit again. Again, another really fast set of pit stops for Red Bull. I believe it was a 2 second and a 1.9.
Yeah, they're entirely locked in for this race.
Definitely.
Regarding pit stops.
It was lightning quick. It was amazing. Alonso had a very interesting strategy. He pitted for a pair of softs. I think mostly he's challenging for the fastest lap.
Yes.
But a very interesting strategy because he did end up having to pit again. Because those softs are not going to hold up for the rest of the race.
And as we talked about, the degradation on that track is high. So the softs will not last that long.
Yeah, so right at the safety car restart, Tsunoda and Magnussen collide, and it ends up in Tsunoda retirement. It was not his. I was annoyed with this.
I felt bad.
Yeah, it wasn't Tsunoda's fault in any way.
And we saw this again. Magnussen is willing to take out drivers.
I don't know. I don't think this was the same thing, though.
But if you think about it, it could be. I mean, but it's just speculation at this point.
He wasn't protecting Hülkenberg because, Hülkenberg finished P10. Yes. But I don't think he was, protecting Hülkenberg.
Well, I think, maybe not just that, maybe he's just not being that careful.
I guess, I could see that. Because, really, that move was callous, and it wasn't very smart. He wasn't, I feel like he wasn't thinking about it.
Yeah.
Right? He just went into the back of Yuki's, tire. There was nothing about it that was it was an accident, really. It didn't seem like it. It was he just wasn't thinking about it, and he just ran into the snow.
Yeah, he just at this point he just doesn't care what he does in that Haas, and it definitely shows. Yes, he wasn't protecting Hülkenberg, but it's easy to figure out what happened, why it happened.
Yeah,
maybe not directly on purpose, but
and then at the safety car restart, it was just straight up
idiotic move, dude.
So Lance Stroll so the cars are coming out of the restart. They're in the final corner, right? They're in the hairpin going to the last corner, so turn 14. And a bunch of cars in front slow down, so everybody's kind of slowing down, and we get to Ricciardo and Stroll. So Ricciardo slows down, right? Because everyone else was slowing down, and then Stroll just doesn't slow down and runs straight into the back of Ricciardo.
And then had the audacity to blame Ricciardo, he suddenly braked. What? You're supposed to brake. I mean...
Yeah, and there was an interview actually afterward with Ricciardo, and he was, angry, and with reason, I think. Because, Stroll... The problem is, if Stroll had ran into him and then said, okay, I wasn't paying attention, that was dumb.
It would have been acceptable.
It wouldn't have been acceptable, but it would have been, more reasonable,
yes.
Right? But the fact that he just was, why did he brake all of a sudden? Dude, you should be watching the rest of the cars. This is your job. You do this for a living.
Yeah.
You should be watching those cars. This is the easiest part of your job.
This is a rookie mistake.
Yeah. And I think it really shows that Lance Stroll does not deserve that seat that he has. We kind of know this already, of course, because Lawrence Stroll is funding the team, right? That's kind of why he gets the seat. But Lance does not deserve that seat in any way.
We're trying to find reasons to see why Lance belongs, because obviously we need to find the best out of these drivers, but this is unacceptable.
Yeah,
the way he's performing.
Yeah, it's just it doesn't make sense. It's why would you say that somebody just brake checked you when everyone else is braking?
Literally, it's a corner. You have to brake for the corner. You just admit you weren't paying attention. And
and especially too in the final standings, right? Stroll was P15 and Alonso was all the way up in P7. I mean, he's not that far up, but he's still in the points solidly. So honestly, Stroll, clearly that car has some potential in it, and Stroll is not able to get it.
Yeah, definitely.
And then so Magnussen comes back into the race after pitting because of his contact with Tsunoda. So that was a late pit stop for him. So not exactly what he would want, definitely.
Yes.
Logan Sargent was given a 10-second time penalty. It kind of sucked because it was close on this one. So basically, Logan came out, or he was driving down the main straight, and Hulkenberg came out of the pits during the safety car, and Logan passed him. That's one of those times when it's close because you're not allowed to pass on a safety car. But if a car is like in the pits, you can pass. So it was kind of close.
So it was like Hulkenberg on the track by the time.
Yeah, he
Logan...
was like I think he was on the pit exit. So he was getting up to speed. So it's a little hard to say. I mean, obviously he got the penalty, but that's like a close.
That sucks for Logan.
So Stroll then gets a 10-second penalty, as I think he rightfully should, for causing a collision with Ricardo. Again, that's totally fair from there.
Just ban him from the race at this point. Like, come on.
So one of my favorite parts from the announcing on this race was when Crofty said, I guess at this race RB stands for really bad in terms of their Shanghai performance.
Oh man.
That one is really funny. I mean, it is true. It was really bad.
It was really bad, but not necessarily their fault.
It was not their fault, but I thought that was really funny. I mean, a double DNF for them, so really not great.
Yeah.
But that was really funny from him. So again, Ricardo retired on lap 34 because his refuser was all screwed up because of his collision with Stroll. He had like no grip on those corners, so it's just again, like we said, it's just dumb from Stroll.
Lando,
Leclerc, Sainz, and Lando were the tire whisperers this race, man. They were all on one-stop strategies.
Well, interesting about that, Ferrari's figured out the tires. We've seen this before on these other races too, and I don't think it's a coincidence. No. I think they definitely have a good strategy with their tires.
Yeah, Leclerc especially has been able to really make it work on these like one-stop strategies. Yeah, but those three, they were the tire whisperers at this race.
Yes, definitely, and that definitely did help them, and especially for Ferrari, who had a bad start to the race.
Another thing I want to highlight, Fernando Alonso had a crazy save out of the last corner. Going in turn 16. It was wild. You should look up a video of this. It was crazy. Yeah. He was on the dirt and he saved it. It was wild to watch. That was very cool, and especially because he's the oldest driver on the grid, and his reflexes are still really fast.
Yeah, I mean the traction is. Especially when you get on the dirt, it's like out the window at that point. But great save by Alonso.
Yeah. And another thing that's interesting about Alonso is actually after he got rid of his softs, he was really fast. So he pitted, got rid of the softs, got on mediums.
And then
he was getting past a lot of drivers, and he set the fastest lap.
He did set the fastest lap.
So that's very interesting to see from him. Ricardo was given a 3-place grid penalty for the next race, which is Miami, for passing Nico Hulkenberg out of the safety car. So similar to Logan Sargent, except this was a little different scenario.
Yes.
But again, passing on the safety car.
Yeah.
Now, we have some other news from the paddock, as Hulkenberg is officially moving teams. I don't think anyone saw this coming.
No one did. I mean, we know that Sauber he moved to Sauber, by the way.
And with plans to stay until
Audi comes in, which is interesting because...
And through Audi takeover, too. He's going to race
he will be.
With Audi.
Yes. And that's interesting to see, and I think it's a good decision for him because he definitely is bringing the life in that Haas.
Yeah.
He's the one scoring the points for Haas, and he's the one giving them life. Like, we, at the beginning of the season, had no hopes for Haas, and he's the one really shining that light for Haas, and I think it's a well-deserved seat.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting. I think it'll be good for Audi to have someone with as much experience as Nico Hulkenberg on their team to lead the way when they begin as a team in the sport. That's very, very competitive, of course, as we know. So I think it'll be definitely good for them to have Hulkenberg. We still don't know who they'll have as their second driver for Sauber for 2025.
Zhou or Bottas.
Well, but they could even go in a different direction.
They could, and get rid of both. Yeah.
So we'll see what that ends up being.
Like, we could get Carlos Sainz
maybe.
Or a new driver.
Yeah. And then the other big news of the F1 world is Adrian Newey is stepping away from the F1 world of Red Bull. So here's the thing with Adrian Newey. So he is going to work on Red Bull's developing a hypercar.
Yeah.
So he's supposedly going to work on that. I think that Newey plays less of a role in the F1 world than people think.
Oh.
So in recent times, Newey has taken somewhat of a step back. He still helps design the car, and some parts of the car are his.
Yes.
But I think that, like, people are thinking, I feel like at this point, that once Newey leaves, like, the Red Bull's going to fall off, and then whoever manages to pick him up will, like, rise to the top. I don't think that'll necessarily happen. I think Red Bulls will still continue to be very dominant. I don't think that Newey is the only reason why they're dominant.
Definitely not. I mean, as we saw a phenomenal pit crew. Phenomenal. Just all the moving parts within that Red Bull organization is just phenomenal. Like, dominance is not easy. Yeah. We saw Mercedes do it, but this Red Bull, it's different. Yeah, at least it's definitely way different than what Mercedes did. Yeah, and they're just like transcending what F1 really is.
That being said, though, I think Newey is an important aspect to have.
Definitely.
If nothing else, it's a confidence boost, I think. Yeah. Because of the weight that he carries around with him.
Yes, I mean, he has a lot of accolades to his name. Yeah. Building championship cars on 3 different teams.
Yeah. And so I think if someone manages to pick him up, especially like someone like Ferrari manages to pick him up, I think it'll be a good move for them. I just don't think it'll be like the total revitalization.
But it could be a confidence booster, as you said before.
Yeah,
for Ferrari.
I think so.
Hypothetically, if they pick him up. Yeah. And he definitely brings a lot. I mean, he brings a lot to the table, but as you said, I agree. It's not all of Red Bull. He's not Red Bull. Yeah. Red Bull is a bunch of people. Yeah. And Verstappen, Yeah.
So now one more thing I wanted to talk about real quick here at the end. I watched my very first Indy Car race. Oh. And let me tell you about it. It's very interesting. So my first impressions of Indy Car. So for context, I watched the Indy Car Grand Prix of Long Beach. Mm-hmm. So Long Beach is a very cool track, actually, in my opinion. So it's a street race, and they have I really like this one corner. They have this fountain, and it's like sort of a roundabout. Oh. They go like halfway around. It's like a semicircle. Mm-hmm. It's really cool. It's a really slow speed corner. But this track is very interesting. A lot of like fast corners, things like that. So, yes. Also, this was Teo Pourchaire's first race in Indy Car, which is it's really good for him because I think he is a very good driver.
He's also an F1 hopeful.
Hopefully, I'll get into F1. But he was the F2 champion and kind of floating around. He didn't really have a seat. He's the reserve driver for Sauber. Mm-hmm. But to get a ride in the Indy Car is definitely very nice for him. Yes. But, so back to Indy Car here. It's very interesting to watch. So it was about 83 laps, I believe. Oh, okay. It moves though. Like I feel like sometimes you watch Formula 1 and it kind of gets slow as you get into the race. It like keeps going. So I think Long Beach is a relatively quick track. I don't think it's very long, but those 83 laps, they just go. Like you don't really feel like you're sitting there for a long time. The time keeps just like passing.
So what's like the aspect that's different from F1?
So there's a couple things, right? So the biggest thing for me that was difficult as someone who has not watched IndyCar before was figuring out who was on the same teams. Oh, okay. So I believe most of them have about 3 person teams. Oh. So but the thing is their liveries are different. So they're somewhat similar, but sometimes they're going to run a different livery, and their regular liveries are different between a team. Okay. So the biggest way you can figure it out is when they show the standings, the font on their number is the same. Oh, okay. That's how you figure out the teams. So as someone who hasn't really watched IndyCar, that was a little bit confusing to me. Yeah. I figured it out somewhat quick, but that was something that was interesting. Mm-hmm. The other interesting thing is the push-to-pass system. So this is similar to the ERS or the energy recovery system that they have in Formula 1. But instead of being like a system that recovers through the braking, they get a specific amount of time they can use it. So I believe they get 200 seconds of push-to-pass per race. And then throughout that race, they can use the push-to-pass whenever they want. But they only get that 200 seconds. So unlike in F1 where you use it and then when like under braking and
you
things
can charge
like that,
it up. Yeah. Just get unlimited use out of it. Okay.
This is like you get 200 seconds. Once you're done with 200 seconds, you're done. You don't have anymore. So that was an interesting thing.
I mean, yeah. I mean, that also shows how like your ERS can crap out like how it does in F1.
And then the other thing I like is that all of the cars are the same. So it's really about who can set up the car the best and driver skill. So that's a nice thing.
I mean, we've seen that also in F1 Academy as well, but IndyCar, that's definitely interesting for that.
Yeah, and then the tire strategy is interesting. So they only have 2 kinds of tires. They have the alternate and the primary. So from what I understand, the alternate is a softer tire, and the primary is a little bit harder tire. It goes for a longer stint. And of course, in IndyCar, they can refuel. So that's something that they don't have in Formula 1. So that adds another component to their strategy of fuel saving in F1 versus in IndyCar. That's not really something they have to worry about as much. So that was an interesting thing I thought for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall impressions of IndyCar, it was very interesting. It was really exciting to watch.
Have to check out a race then.
Yeah, and honestly, I watched it while I was watching the Dubai Autonomous Racing.
I
want to get in this really quick.
Let's do that.
That race was so boring. I'm not even gonna lie. So I watched this live stream on YouTube.
All right,
First of all,
he watched the entire race.
It took so long. The pre-race stuff was supposed to be done, I think, in like an hour. It did not go an hour. It was at least like an hour and a half. It took so long. And then we finally got to the race. The race was so boring because the cars don't work that well. Now I get that like it's experimental. They don't necessarily have like they're not like fully there yet, right?
Yeah.
And I genuinely think that from this race, it's clear that the technology is not ready for this yet.
Yes.
The cars are not fast. They were the way they do the start is kind of weird. So they can't really do a standing start because I don't think the technology is there yet. So they basically have like 2 laps under safety car conditions. So there's no actual safety car.
So they do like a race restart as the actual start of the race?
Yeah, kinda. So there's no actual safety car. It's like the cars are programmed that when there's like a yellow flag, they only go a certain speed.
Oh, okay, I see.
So it was basically they do that for the first 2 laps and then they go, but the cars didn't go. They just kind of stopped, which it was so sad.
Yeah, I attempted to watch that, but I couldn't get through 5 minutes of it.
So
it was not that fun.
the cars just stop in the first corner. They have like a button they can press to reboot it, so they reboot it, but then there was another yellow flag. So now the cars start going really slow. But of course, under the yellow flag conditions, they won't pass each other because they're programmed not to. So now it's like one car in front will stop, and then they'll just all stop. And then like it was so uninteresting. So then finally we eventually get going and the cars are not going fast because like supposedly they have to like learn the track. I thought they would have learned the track at this point because they've done qualifying, they've done like practice things. Clearly they did not because they were going really really slow. And so they finally make it to the back straight, and the one of the cars just like it just randomly like veers off the road and then it just stops. And so then there's a yellow flag and then they all just stop and they won't pass the car that's like clearly off the road and like disabled and it's not working.
God.
And they won't pass it. They just stop on the track. And so they finally they get the car off the track. Every car goes back to the pits. They probably were in the pits for another half hour trying to fix this one car. Eventually they just retire their car and then give us like 2 more laps of racing, which really was just under the like yellow flag conditions. It was so boring. I understand that like the technology is not necessarily there yet. I don't see then why they decided to put on this whole race.
What's interesting to see though, I think this entire autonomous racing is not really like what people want to see. I feel like something that would be cool to see, I think it's just a concept I thought of, is we see these esports racers, right? It'd be cool if they had like controlling it from like a garage and they're like was it like RC, but not really RC, like they're in like the rig and they're actually racing the cars and they're actually out on the track.
That could be interesting. Yeah, I could see that. But the way they're doing it now,
no, they're not. They're definitely not ready.
I would really love to see this be successful in the future because I think it could be really cool.
Yes,
a really
definitely.
interesting innovation. But I also think on the one hand, it can never replace real drivers going after it. I don't think you can replace that kind of skill that those drivers have. I just think it's not the same, right? They had the other part of this race that they had was they invited out Daniel Kvyat to this race, and basically they put him. So the car is essentially a Super Formula car, right? So the Super Formula car series is a Japanese Formula series, so open wheel racing.
Yeah.
It's sort of, if you had to put it somewhere, it's like kind of in between F2 and F1. So they're basically Super Formula cars. So they put Daniel Kvyat in one of these Super Formula cars that was, of course, like a regular one.
Yes.
Right? This one was not controlled by a robot. And then they were like, all right, and they sent him out and just like drove around with one of the like AI controlled ones, but they were both going so slowly.
Both of them?
Yeah. So I thought, okay, what I was hoping would happen is that they were like this. So the car that they put out with Kvyat, they said it was like the benchmark car. So I was like, okay, so this car is gonna be actually going kind of fast.
Yeah.
it was not going fast. It didn't. To be fair, to its credit, it did not stop on the track like some of the other ones.
Okay.
However, it was not going fast. You could tell that Kvyat would pass it, and then he would slow down a ton and let it go back, and then pass it again.
Just for the camera.
I was hoping he would like push really hard and see how many times he could pass it. He did not do that. Also, the announcers did not sound very knowledgeable. They kept calling him Fiat. They forgot the K, I guess, in his name.
Oh.
They just honestly, the whole production seemed like a lot of the people in it were not very knowledgeable, except for like, of course, the people on the teams were very knowledgeable. Yes. But the people like the announcers, some of the reporters didn't seem like they were really that knowledgeable about the topic. Yeah. So that kind of I feel like detracted from it. So that was not great to see. But yeah, for now, my review of the Dubai Autonomous Racing League is it's not a must watch.
Yeah, I mean, I got through 5 minutes and got bored. So
I think that wraps it up for us, guys. I hope you guys got through more than 5 minutes with us, and we'll see you for the next one.
Goodbye.